Hey everyone. So I was linked a new survey for the Player's Handbook. So this one is for feats. I did one on spells, I'd say about a month ago. And what it basically was is they listed a bunch of spells and they asked me if I was satisfied with them. And the problem is that they didn't ask for any feedback for each of those spells. So if I'm unsatisfied with a spell that I think is too weak, or I am unsatisfied with a spell that I think is game breaking, I'm unsatisfied with those spells for very different reasons, but there was no way for me to give that context. So this is for feats. There's a lot less feats in the player's handbook than there are spells. So I'm hoping there's a little more context here. I guess we'll find out. So, would you like to rate the feat material in the player's handbook? Yes, I would. What was the first edition of D&D you played? It was basic. In fact, I was just looking at it. There's my basic book. That's the one I started with. All right. Do you use feats when playing 5th edition D&D? Yeah, I always use them. And I've got nothing against someone who doesn't use them. And if I went down to a table and they said we don't use feats, I wouldn't walk away. But it just so happens that I've always used them, and everyone I play with has always used them. Okay, so this is, yeah, so we're going to go from very dissatisfied to very satisfied. This is the same as it was for spells. Um, yeah, okay, so I want to put some context in before I get started. So I'm going to say some feats I'm dissatisfied with that are powerful feats. I'm going to try to explain why when that happens. But one of just overall, my main problem with feats is that there are some feats that are so good that if you want to play a certain kind of character, there's no options. You have to. The obvious example, I think, is crossbow expert. So if I want to play an archery character, not only do I have to take the crossbow expert feat, and so it's essentially a feat tax because you need that bonus action attack. That's so dramatic, especially at lower levels, that not having crossbow expert is just a massive disadvantage. So you kind of have to take it. Not only do I have to take it, but it also tells me what weapon I have to use. I have to use a hand crossbow. So, that kind of feat I think is terrible. I think it's bad for the game because it is, first off, a feat you must take. There's no options. And second of all, it is reducing the other options you previously had, like what kind of weapon to use. And so I think those kind of feats are bad for the game. I think there's two ways to fix it. The first is to have feats be more generic. I think we kind of have gone down the right road. Like with Player's Handbook, I'd say is their first and their worst attempt at feats. Xanathar's, the feats were better. And then Tasha's, I'd say the feats were the best. Tasha's has a list of feats that are, none of them are absolute trash. Like probably the worst one is Chef, and it's a half feat, so you're even getting an ability score bonus. So it's still not entirely worthless. The Player's Handbook has feats that are absolutely worthless. It also has feats that are so good that you have to take them. So they're essentially a tax on your character. And I don't like either of those. But when we have feats like Crusher or Slasher, these are more generic feats that increase weapon use. I would like more like that than ones like Crossbow Expert. So when you see me say I'm dissatisfied with those kinds of things, any feat I think is going to make the game actively worse, I'm going to get very dissatisfied to. And there's no feat that I think is mechanically poor that makes the game worse. Mechanically poor feats, the worst thing they do is they just take up space and we don't take them. But feats that are good, but you have no choice but to take them, and they restrict your options, are actively making the game worse because these kinds of benefits could be provided without pigeonholing characters, without costing them feats in the first place. Maybe like I do, -5 to hit, +10 damage. I allow it without a feat for any weapon, and just for attack actions. But what it does is it means you don't have to take Great Weapon Master. You don't have to take Sharpshooter when normally you do, because those are just feat taxes, and I'm against feat that you have to take. I like options. The other way it could be fixed is to have a different feat for every different kind of weapon. So if you're going to have crossbow expert, maybe it should give bonus action attacks to all crossbows, but then there should be a bow expert and there should be a sling expert, right? Like we should have feats that are equally as good, that give us different options, and they don't exist. So that's why I'm going to be giving some of these very dissatisfied, despite the fact they're powerful feats. The other thing I want to mention is that there was something else I wanted to mention. What was it? Yes. When I talk about bad feats, I'm often going to say nobody takes these. But I know there's no feat in the game that nobody ever takes. There are people out there who've taken the worst feats in the game. And, I think some of them don't care, right? They just like the idea that the word chef is on their character sheet because their character is a chef. When I say nobody ever takes this, I mean I don't take it, and the people I play with don't take it, and I'm sure there are exceptions. Okay? All right. Okay, so let's start with feats. At the top of the list, we got alert. So alert is a good feat. We're starting with one of the best ones, I think, in the player's handbook, because the alert feat is not only mechanically strong, but it's not so mechanically strong that you have to take it. So we see it on characters because it's a good feat, but there's no character build that absolutely requires the alert feat. So, yeah, I don't know how to get better than that. Very satisfied. Okay, so first they want me to do feats overall. So I just did a big rant about feats overall, and so I'm going to give them slightly satisfied, and I've already explained why. All right, so athlete. Athlete is a terrible feat. I believe it's a half feat, so meaning you get an ability score bonus with it. Other than that, it's, if I recall, pretty much trash. I think you can get up from prone with 5 feet of movement. And I'm sure there's other things too, but nothing that is good enough to even be remembered. So dissatisfied. Actor. Actor used to be a better feat when it was just the player's handbook, and you didn't have tashes. Then you'd be playing something like a warlock, and you'd have an odd charisma ability score, and you'd want to make it even. So you'd take a half feat, and you didn't have a lot of options, and actor was one of them. And if I recall, actor allows you to mimic voices, and I always thought that was kind of cool because you can combine it with something like disguise self. So you know what, I am overall satisfied with actor, but I do think it is maybe too weak in comparison to some of the feats that are not in the player's handbook. Charger. Charger is a full feat. I'm sure it's a full feat, or I would maybe take it once in a while. And yeah, it's bad. If I recall, you do your dash action, and then you can do an attack as a bonus action. A single attack, not an attack action. And that's why Charger is bad, because you can get a dash action as a bonus action, and then you can just take a full attack action, and it's not even going to cost you a full feat. And because it's using your bonus action for that attack, there's no way to combine it with a bonus action dash. So it just doesn't work. I'm dissatisfied with that. Crossbow expert, I'm very dissatisfied with. I talked about this already, so I'm not going to do it again. Defensive duelist. Defensive duelist. Okay, I'm going to get in trouble, but here we go. Defensive duelist is a good feat. It gives you a reaction that increases your armor class by the amount equal to your proficiency bonus. It works with a certain kind of weapon, right? Because you're a duelist, right? So, a perfectly reasonable feat. However, it is rendered a bad feat because shield wrecks all this kind of cool stuff in the game. The shield spell. The shield spell wrecks all kinds of fun stuff in the game because it's so overwhelmingly better than them. So defensive duelist is rendered completely irrelevant because the shield spell exists. Defensive duelist is a full feat, but it is absolutely overshadowed by a first level reaction spell. And shield wrecks all kinds of stuff. This is why one of my house rules is that we don't use shield. And suddenly things like defensive duelist come up and they start looking really cool. But unfortunately, because shield exists, there's just no reason to take it. It's way too expensive. Gives you not it. I mean, you should have shield, right? If you take defensive duelist, I'm going to just ask you, why didn't you just take shield? You'd be so much more powerful. Yeah, it's too bad. I'm going to say I'm slightly satisfied with it because I don't think it's defensive duelist's fault. It's defensive duelist is well designed. It's a shield spell that's poorly designed. Dual wielder. So yeah, two weapon fighting is not well designed. So it's already bad. It's working on something that's already bad, and it doesn't do enough. So it gives you like a +1 armor class, which is less than if you were using a shield, and then it's going to give you you can use heavier weapons, so you don't have to use light weapons. So that's going to add like 1 damage to your weapon damage, and then you can draw both your weapons at once because without a feat, you can't draw both your weapons at the same time, and so that shouldn't be, and like you shouldn't need a feat for that. So dual wielder works on something that already doesn't work, right? Or is put on something that already doesn't work, and it doesn't add very much to it. So yeah, I don't. I'm dissatisfied, and it would need a lot to fix it. Dungeon Delver. Dungeon Delver is the trap feat. It allows you to. I think it gives you resistance to the damage from traps. I think it might give you advantage on all saves versus traps, or maybe only certain kinds of saves versus traps. But it's all about dealing with traps. Traps aren't a big enough part of the challenges of the game to devote a feat to. They're just not. And there are things for dealing with traps built into characters, and no adventure with traps is going to assume that anyone has Dungeon Delver. It's just not going to be a requirement for dealing with any trap. So, dissatisfied. Durable. Durable is weak and bad. It is a half feat, so you do get something for it. But, basically, I think it gives you a bonus on your hit die rolls on a short rest. But the bonus isn't big enough to make it worthwhile, even for a half feat. So, yeah, dissatisfied. All right. Elemental Adept. So I love the idea of Elemental Adept. Implementation, not so big. Okay, so the idea of Elemental Adept is you pick an elemental type. So let's say you pick fire. And then you're going to play, say, a fire sorcerer. So you're going to take Fireball and Firebolt and Scorching Ray and those kinds of things. And then Elemental Adept removes fire resistance from any creatures you fight. And if you roll, I believe if you roll a 1 on damage, it's treated as a 2, which is almost irrelevant. It's all about getting rid of resistance. The problem with Elemental Adept is if you are facing any devil in the game, it will be immune to fire. If you're facing fire elementals, they'll be immune to fire. And there's different kinds of fire elementals too, remember? There's salamanders and azure. There's red dragons. And the list goes on of creatures that are outright immune to fire. Elemental Adept does not allow you to deal with them. It does not allow you to deal with them. So what happens? You have a character totally devoted to do a certain type of damage. You took a feat so that it would apply to more enemies, but you still have a huge number of enemies that are outright immune, and it doesn't help you. So I've seen this taken, and it always leads to disappointment. So yeah, dissatisfied. Though I do like the idea of Elemental Adept being in the game, but it needs to do something else. It needs to give you a way to deal with immunity, and it doesn't. Grappler. I've been told many times that Grappler is the worst feat in the game. I don't agree that it's the worst feat in the game, but I do think it's weak. So the idea is that when you have somebody grappled, you can pin them, and if you pin them, they become restrained. And the point that gets made, and I think it's a reasonable point, is that if you got something grappled and you knock it prone with a shove attack, then it will have disadvantage on attacks against you, and you will have advantage on attacks against it. So why do I need a feat? And I agree that it's not worth a feat, and I agree it's not a good feat, but I do think there are advantages of a creature being restrained instead of being prone. So, yeah, it just the ranged people in your party are sure going to appreciate a creature being restrained. They're not going to appreciate a creature being prone. So, yeah, I think Grappler gets a bit of a bad rap as being the worst, but I do agree it's a bad feat. So I'm still dissatisfied with it. Great Weapon Master. All right, so unlike Crossbow Expert, I don't think this pigeonholes you into like single weapons nearly as much, but it does pigeonhole you into a certain type of weapon. If I'm going to make a melee character, I need a heavy weapon. So, I wanted to use a pike. Nope, not a heavy weapon, or maybe it is a heavy weapon. Pike. Let's say I wanted to use a longsword versatilely. Okay, that one I know. That is definitely not a heavy weapon. So I want to be Aragorn, right? And I'm using Arundel. Well, I can't use Great Weapon Master, so it's not a viable build. And so that's really unfortunate when major fantasy characters can't be built viably in the game because the weapons they use, which are completely just iconic fantasy weapons, are so heavily disadvantaged because we have feats that are boosting niche weapons to such a degree that you have to take them. But it's not as bad as Crossbow Expert because Crossbow Expert forces you to take one single weapon. At least there are several different kinds of heavy weapons. But I still think this is bad for the game. And I still think it's a feat tax. And I'm very dissatisfied. Healer. Healer's good. It's been a while since I've used Healer. I believe it's 4 plus your character level that you heal. Or maybe it's a D8 plus your character level. Anyway, it heals about that amount. And you can heal somebody once per short rest. And it uses a use of a healer kit. And a healer kit has 10 uses. So as soon as you take the healer feat, you fill your backpack full of healer kits. And then I think it works fine. Not a bad feat at all. I'd say I'm satisfied with it. Heavily armored. Okay, so there's going to be 3 feats here. There's going to be lightly armored, moderately armored, and heavily armored. And they just give you proficiency in armor. And lightly armored, you can take if you have no armor proficiency, moderately if you already have light armor proficiency, and heavy if you already have medium armor proficiency. And lightly armored and heavily armored do extremely little for you. The fact is that plate mail and shield is not all that much better than half plate and shield. Definitely not, like a feat, right? You're spending a feat to get what might be 1 armor class. Now, I do think these are all half feats, if memory serves. But the heavily armored, lightly armored, I don't think they give you enough. But moderately armored is good. And the reason moderately armored is good is because it gives you shield proficiency. And honestly, I think all 3 of these should give you shield proficiency if you don't already have it. I mean, you take heavily armored, and it's not going to give you shield proficiency if you don't have it already. I don't understand why that is. They seem to tie shield proficiency to medium armor proficiency, not just in terms of feats. And I'm not sure why that is. But heavily armored and lightly armored, not good enough. I think that's the fix. You need to give them shield proficiency as well. So I'm going to say slightly dissatisfied. I don't think it's terrible. Heavy Armor Master. Okay, so Heavy Armor Master allows you to reduce the damage that you take when you're wearing heavy armor. And it's bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing, and I believe it's only against non-magical weapons. Don't understand that restriction. Not sure why it's there. I mean, some creatures have magical attacks, and I'm not sure why this feat doesn't work against those, but something like Rage does. Don't know. And I would get rid of that altogether. But the main issue I have with this feat is if you take this feat at level 1, because you're, a variant human or custom lineage, it's actually really powerful. I mean, you got goblins doing, I don't know, d6 plus, is it 2? So this might be taking your damage and cutting it in half. Well, that's really, really good. But then, when we get to high levels, it's irrelevant. The amount is so low. You're taking 50 points of damage, sometimes more than that. You're going to reduce it by 2, right? Like, that's hardly worth the effort. So I think the obvious fix, I like the idea of Heavy Armor Master. The obvious fix is it should scale, right? It should maybe be equal to your proficiency bonus or something. But it doesn't, so I am slightly dissatisfied. Inspiring Leader is an okay feat. I think it used to be a really good feat. but it's not anymore, and that's because there's so many other ways to get temporary hit points now, and so many ways that get temporary hit points more frequently. That's the big thing. So Inspiring Leader gives you the ability to give you and your party temporary hit points once per short rest. I think it takes 10 minutes, and it adds your charisma bonus plus your level in temporary hit points. Now, if I have a Twilight Cleric that can be delivering that amount of temporary hit points every round, then what's the point of Inspiring Leader, right? But hopefully, most groups don't have Twilight Clerics. There's also the Artillerist that can do temporary hit points every round. If you don't have either of those in your group, then I think Inspiring Leader is a solid way to give some temporary hit points. I think I'm satisfied. Keen Mind. So I know this one only because I used to occasionally consider it before Tasha's, because I play wizards. Sometimes they would need 1 point of intelligence. Keen Mind does that. It doesn't give you much else. It gives you a perfect memory, and ironically, I don't remember what else it gives you. It's not good enough anymore. But it used to be something I would occasionally take. The problem is that all the mechanical stuff beyond the +1 intelligence, it's all more flavor, right? It's not a lot of mechanical boosts. So yeah, I've got to say I'm dissatisfied with it. If you're going to do a half feat, the part of it that isn't the stat boost should be somehow relevant. Flavor is a good start, but then you need to add on some mechanics as well. Lightly armored. Okay, so I talked about this with heavily armored. Not going to talk about it again. Slightly dissatisfied. Moving on. Linguist. So Linguist is a bad feat. I do believe it's a half feat, so there's that. I think it was the other one I would consider other than Keen Mind. But again, I mean, I'm playing a wizard. I need a +1 intelligence, so I'm looking at half feats. Before Tasha's was around. Now that Tasha's is around, it's Fey Touched or it's Telekinetic. But before Tasha's is around, I'm looking at options. And then I come across Linguist. And I can get a +1 intelligence, and then I get some additional languages. I'm a wizard. I already had Comprehend Language as a ritual. And it allows me to read all languages and understand them. There's also spells that will allow me to speak all languages. A couple extra languages on my character sheet is really actually so small. It's just not good enough. Is dissatisfied with this. Maybe if it gave you like the ability to understand any language with some kind of ability check, or decipher any language, then it might be good, or better. Okay, so lucky. I am certain if I was to predict right now, I would make a bet that if you were to look at every feat that's listed here and then got the results at the end, lucky is going to have more very dissatisfieds and more very satisfieds than any other feat. And I think you're going to have very little in between, because this is one of the most polarizing feats in the game. It might be the most polarizing feat in the game. And basically, you get 3 dice. You can replace attack rolls with them, saving throws, attack rolls against you with them. It has this weird working in the mechanic of the way it's worded, so that if you have disadvantage and you use a lucky, then suddenly you get super advantage. Doesn't make any sense. And it creates some weird interactions, like where characters deliberately, they fall prone so they can attack with disadvantage so they can get super advantage through lucky. It's kind of silly. Other than that, I don't dislike the lucky feat. I'm not super into it, but I think it's okay feat. I don't have a problem with it. I think it could be better worded. I think that weird interaction is easy to get rid of. So I'm going to say slightly satisfied, but I think it's an easy fix. Mage Slayer is not good enough. So Mage Slayer is a full feat. It gives you an opportunity attack if somebody is casting a spell and you're next to them. And I think it also gives you saving throw advantage against a spell if you're next to the caster. Problem is, of course, caster could just back up and then you lose everything, and you've expended an entire feat for it. I don't think it's good enough at what it's supposed to do. I like the idea of a Mage Slayer feat. I think it should be in the game, but it needs beefing up. So slightly dissatisfied with that. Magic Initiate, I'm going to say slightly satisfied. So what it does gives you cantrip and a spell. And I used to take this feat I don't anymore because there's newer, better feats that do similar things, but they fix two problems with this. So this gives you a cantrip first level spell, and the two problems are that the spells are going to be tied to an ability score based on the class that the spell is from, rather than what's best for you. And the second is once you cast that first level spell, if you have spell slots in that class, you can recast it. And if you don't, then you can't. Both those things have been fixed with more recent feats. I expect Magic Initiate will have that fix in 2024. In the meantime, I'll say slightly satisfied. Just needs a little fix, and it's fine. Martial Adept. So this gives you a superiority die. It's only a d6. That's not a big deal to me. The big deal to me is it's once per short rest that it recovers, right? And it's only one die, and you get 2 Battle Master maneuvers you can do with it. And it's just not enough. Now, I think the obvious fix for it is it should be a half feat. Martial Adept isn't good enough to be a full feat, but as a half feat, I think it'd be fine. So as it is, I got to say slightly dissatisfied. I like the idea of it existing, and I think it could be fixed easily. All right, medium armor master. So this one, so if you already have medium armor proficiency, you can take this. Allows you to add 3 from your dexterity to your armor class instead of the normal 2 that medium armor usually gives you. And you can do stealth in medium armor without disadvantage. So, most medium armors provide disadvantage. Not all of them. There's breastplates and chain shirts, but the rest of them all provide disadvantage to your stealth rolls. You can get rid of that. I don't know that this is good enough. We're talking 1 armor class, and that's if you have enough dexterity. And it doesn't give you much more than that. A little bit of stealth. Yeah, and not nearly the best way to improve your stealth. So yeah, I'm slightly dissatisfied. It could be better. Mobile. Mobile's okay. I think it's maybe slightly on the weak side, but I've seen mobile on optimized characters and it works okay. So it gives you 5 extra movement, allows you to move through difficult terrain without extra movement. And most importantly, I believe you have to make an attack, but you make an attack and then you can move away without provoking opportunity attacks. That's usually the main draw why people take it. And yeah, I'm satisfied. I'm not very satisfied because I think it's maybe a little bit on the weak side. I would like to see it maybe, I don't know, maybe like a 10-foot movement bonus or something. Moderately armored, as I said, it's better than the other armored feats. I'll say I'm satisfied with that. I kind of think that's the one that should be the model for the other armor feats. Mounted Combatant. This is a feat that absolutely should be in the game, but it doesn't do the job. It's kind of all the mechanics are about keeping your mount alive, except it's not going to do the trick. If you are riding just a regular old horse and you take the Mounted Combatant feat thinking that that's going to keep your horse alive, I got bad news for you. It isn't. And so your horse is going to die from area of effect or something like that. And then you're without a mount, right? The other option is you have mounts that are easily replaceable, like Phantom Steed, I should say, or much beefier, right? Various pets uses mounts. Things like Battle Masters on their Steel Defenders and things like that. So your mount is a lot harder to kill. That's another way to do it. So those both work better than having Mounted Combatant, which is an entire feat. And feats are expensive and they should do a lot. And Mounted Combatant doesn't. I'm slightly dissatisfied with it because I like the idea. I think it should be in the game. It should just be better. Observant. I've taken Observant, meaning it must be a half feat because it doesn't give you a lot more beyond the +1 to. It must be Wisdom. And then the thing I always remember about Observant is it gives you +5 to 2 passive scores. One is your perception, and I'm not sure why it gives +5 to passive perception, but not to your active perception. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The other thing I remember is it gives you a +5 to your passive investigation. And I don't think I've ever had a DM ask me what my passive investigation is, ever. So Yeah, that's almost comical, right? Like investigation just sounds like it's going to be an active skill, and they've got a feat that's going to give you a bonus to investigation, but only if you use it passively. It's just so weird. I've got to say, slightly dissatisfied. Okay, Polar Master. So I've talked about this before. This is more like Crossbow Expert in that it's really pushing you in a very niche direction. And if you combine it with Great Weapon Master, expect lots of glaives and halberds. Let's just say that. And glaives and halberds mechanically are basically identical. Okay, so Resilient. Hey, there's a good one. I use Resilient all the time. I think it's a good feat. I'm going to say very satisfied. So it allows you to pick one ability score, and you become proficient in saving throws for that ability score, and you get a +1 on that ability score. Really nice. Now, resilient strength, resilient intelligence, and resilient charisma, you're never going to see. It's always going to be wisdom, dexterity, or constitution. Ritual caster. So ritual caster's an okay feat. Don't get me wrong, but I think it's got a problem. And that problem is that, so if I take Ritual Caster, my hope is probably that I'm going to have some higher level rituals. But that's not in my control. It's in the DM's control. Ritual Caster should scale with level, giving you additional rituals as you level up based on your current level. And it doesn't do that, and it should. So I'm slightly dissatisfied. Because now hopefully your DM is nice to you and just gives you the spells you want to have. But you shouldn't have to count on that. You took a feat, right? So you should be empowered to do that for yourself. Savage Attacker is bad. Okay, so Savage Attacker allows you to re-roll a weapon damage die, or maybe it's both. I think it's just one weapon die, and I think it's once per turn, and it's just not enough, right? So Savage Attacker will slow down gameplay because you're re-rolling, but the annoying thing is that it's happening every time this person's taking a turn. They're doing the re-roll, and and then it's not dramatic, right? Like if you're going to do a re-roll and it's dramatic, well, hey, okay. But Savage Attacker, when it comes up, it just doesn't make a big difference. So it doesn't even feel good after you get the result. So yeah, dissatisfied. I think if you're going to keep something like that in the game, it needs to be a lot more powerful. Sentinel. Okay, so that's one of the better feats in the game because Sentinel is a great feat for a melee character. But you're going to find all kinds of melee characters that don't take it because it does a bunch of interesting things, and none of them are necessary. So it's a mechanically effective flavor thing that some melee characters are going to want and others aren't. That's perfect, right? And Sentinel is never a feat that you take and you go, wow, this sucks. It's not. It's a good feat. So yeah, very satisfied with that. Sharpshooter, now we're down the same route as we were with Great Weapon Master. It's better than Crossbow Expert because it's not forcing you into one weapon. You can use this with any ranged weapon. In fact, it probably is better than Great Weapon Master too, because Great Weapon Master is really forcing you to use certain types of melee weapon. Well, Sharpshooter actually works with any type of ranged weapon. So you know what? I'm liking Sharpshooter more, but it is still a feat tax. Still a feat tax that you must take, and those are bad for the game. I mean, just give ranged characters the ability to do the -5/+10, and then have Sharpshooter, do the other things like, avoiding cover and stuff like that. Like what I do is I do a -5/+10 on your attack action, automatic. Everyone can do it, any weapon. But if you do Sharpshooter, you could do it with your bonus action too. Or if you have any reaction attacks from anything, you could use it for that as well. So then you don't have to have it. My issue with Sharpshooter is you have to have it. And if you have to have it, then you shouldn't have to pay for it, right? Yeah, it's a feat tax. Bad for the game. Shield Master. Shield Master is a little on the weak side. It's okay. You can shove an opponent prone with a bonus action. It's like an opposed check. You have to do an attack action first. That's occasionally useful. And the problem with it is there's a bonus to dexterity saving throws, and that actually sounds okay, but it's so specific that it doesn't work for area of effect, right? And And then if you can't even, shield off because the fireball, the flame is coming at you and you could kind of hide behind it, nope, doesn't do anything for that. In fact, that portion of the feature almost never comes into play. I think it's got to be a spell specifically directed at you that requires dexterity to save. That doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen very often. So, yeah. I like the idea of Shield Master. I'm going to give it slightly dissatisfied. It's just too weak. Skilled is terrible. Skilled is bad. So it gives you, I think it's 3 proficiencies in skills. And I think it's a full feat. So if you want skilled, go to Tasha's, look up skill mastery. I think it's skill mastery. That's the one you want. That one's a good feat. Skilled is a bad feat. It is not as good as skill mastery. Skill mastery is a half feat too. So yeah, I'm dissatisfied. It's just a waste of space. Skulker. I like the idea of Skulker. I think it's a little too weak. It's okay. There's certain situations, like if you're in the dark and somebody's looking at you with dark vision, you will have light obscurement, so you could do the hide action, and you wouldn't even need cover. Things like that can be okay, but it doesn't do enough, right? If I am going to make a Skulker character, then I want Skulker to be giving me some significant stealth benefits, and for the most part, I'd say they're pretty minor. So yeah, I'm going to say slightly dissatisfied. It needs a boost. Spell Sniper. I don't think it's a good feat. Okay, so what does it do? You get a spell. It's got to be an attack cantrip, and you're not going to have the flexible casting. So if you take Eldritch Blast, you have to use Charisma. It doubles your range with that cantrip. Cantrips just aren't good enough, right? The only attack cantrip that ends up being very good at all is Eldritch Blast, and that's only if you take Warlock levels, because you need the invocations, and if you get the invocations, then Eldritch Blast can be quite good. But if I'm already Warlock, then I already have Eldritch Blast. I don't need a feat to get it, and it already has good range, and frankly, I can get an even better range through invocations as well than Spell Sniper would ever give me. I can get a ridiculous range by combining, I think it's Eldritch Spear with Spell Sniper, but it's pointless. It's worthless, right? The Eldritch Blast is already 120 feet range. You don't need more range than that. This just isn't worth a feat. So yeah, dissatisfied. Tavern Brawler. I believe there's a grapple that's a bonus action involved in Tavern Brawler. Here's my problem with Tavern Brawler. So number one, I think it's too weak. But the other problem is I don't see the point. Why do we have a feat for brawling in taverns? Am I going to make a character that's specialized in tavern brawling? Because if a DM is throwing tavern brawls into the game, it's not because they expect your characters to be specialized in it. It's for fun, right? These aren't the main challenges. I don't think this needs a feat. And yeah, so I'm dissatisfied. I think conceptually it's unnecessary. Tough. So plus 2 hit points per level, and it's good. It's a good feat. You don't have to have it, but if you take it, it's okay. So yeah, that's about as good as I'd expect feats to be. Warcaster. So yeah, I'm a spellcaster. I want to cast while holding a weapon and shield. Then I want Warcaster. It also allows me to do opportunity attacks and replace them with a spell that's targeted at the person who provoked the attack. That can be very useful. And then it gives you advantage on concentration saves against damage. And that's also useful. It's not a must-have, though. I make all kinds of casters that don't have Warcaster. So I think it's a good feat. Do I think it could be improved? I think it could be improved. I'm going to give it satisfied. But I think it's a good feat. Weapon Master's horrible. Weapon Master gives you weapon proficiencies, and that's it. I think it might be a half feat, but still, ugh. Weapon proficiencies are so easy to get, and just almost always unnecessary. That yeah, this is a waste of space. All right, I think that's the end of the list, but I'm only at 38%, meaning, yeah, they're asking something else. Have you ever taken this feat when building a character or played with someone who took this feat? All right. So taking the feat when building the character, when I've built a character, is oh, I almost think I need to make sure it's got to be a character that I've played, because I've built a lot of characters that I didn't play. Um, Played with someone who took this feat. I DM a lot for a lot of players who play a lot of different characters. So I can't really answer this. So yeah, so for taking a feat when building a character, I'm going to answer yes if I've played a character with that feat. And played with someone who took this feat, I'm going to answer yes if I was a player playing with another player who took the feat and I'm aware that they took it. How about that? Okay? All right. So, alert, both. Athlete, neither. Actor, I've taken. I don't recall if anyone else has. Charger, neither. Crossbow expert is a feat tax, so of course we have it. Defensive duelist, I've done it, but there were house rules that made it more favorable to me. Dual wielder, nope. Done. Ooh, have I seen somebody else do it? I don't think so. Dungeon delver, nope. Durable, nope. Elemental adept, I've absolutely seen other players take it multiple times. They're always disappointed. Grappler, I don't think so. Great weapon master's a feat tax. Healer, I've taken and seen taken. Heavy armor master, both. Inspiring leader, both. Keen mind, I've taken. Lightly armored, I don't think so. Linguist, I don't think so. Lucky for sure, both. Mage Slayer, I've seen other people use it, and yeah, the wizard just moves away. Anyway, Magic Initiate, yeah, both, though not much anymore. Martial Adept, I've seen other people take it. It doesn't have a big impact. Medium Armor Master, no. Mobile, absolutely both, yeah. Moderately Armored, I have taken it for sure, and I'm sure other players have. Mounted Combatant, yeah, both, and usually disappointing results. Observant, I've absolutely taken. Polar Master's a feat tax. Resilient, I've taken. I'm sure I've played with people who've taken it too. Ritual Caster, both again. Savage Attacker, I've seen other players play it. Ugh. Alright, Sentinel, both. Sharpshooter is a tax. Shield Master, both. Skulker, I've seen it played. I've never done it myself. Spell Sniper, same thing. Tavern Brawler, I don't think so. Tough, I've taken it for sure. I think I've played with people taking it too. Warcaster for sure. And Weapon Master, no. Anything else we should know? Okay, I'm going to cut a bit here because I need to do some typing. Okay, so what I've written is, yes, I like playing with feats, but some feats in the player's handbook have some issues. First, and issues, I did a lot of S's. There we go. First, we have some feats that provide little to no benefits, and so nobody takes them, and what's the point of them being there at all? If I want to be durable, I don't take the durable feat, I take the tough feat. That doesn't really make sense, but the mechanics for durable just aren't there. My bigger issue is, though, that some of these feats actively make the game worse. Like, if I want to make an archery character, Crossbow Expert is so good, I pretty much need to take it. So, not only am I in a situation where there's a feat I must take, but also, that feat is going to pigeonhole me into using one weapon, hand crossbow for bonus action attack. So you are reducing my viable options by having this feat. And it should either be more generic, like different bonuses for different weapons, or not exist. Have I ever been a dungeon master? Yeah, you know how much I'm a dungeon master? I dungeon master probably 15 times in a month. And I play quite a bit too. So yeah, right now I would say it asks in the past year what percentage of your overall D&D playing time has been spent DMing. I'd say in the past month it's been about 60%. In the past year, closer to 75. So yeah, I'll say 75%. What is my age? I am 49 years old. And which of these terms best describes your gender? I am a man-child. And that's the survey. Okay, so I hope that was helpful to some of you. If you want to see me do more surveys, Anytime one of these surveys comes up, make sure to send me the link and I'll take a look. Otherwise, till next time, sit back, relax, have some fun. D&D's for everyone. Talk to you all later.